we do have a quorum, and we do have our vice chair, so I think we will go ahead and start the meeting.
All right.
Madam Chair.
Well, welcome everyone. Happy New Year. I'm Alexis Pickering, the ECHD Commission Vice President. Happy to chair the meeting today. Gosh, my brain, like this is my first formal meeting after coming back from holiday. So excuse me if I'm a little bumpy here. All right, well, we'll start off with the calling of the roll. Ms. Elaine.
Thank you. Yes, I do see that Madam President did just join, but we'll go ahead and share from here if that's okay. Mayor McLean?
Yes, thank you.
Roll call, Ryan Davidson. Tom Daly.
Here.
Alexis Pickering.
Here.
Lance McGinnis Brown.
Here.
Is Lance on? Let's see.
Here.
Okay, Greg Rast.
Here.
Okay. Zach Pipemeyer. Jeff Flynn or Nick Miller.
Jeff Flynn. Here.
There's Jeff. Okay. Ashley Ford Squires.
It's off on the computer.
Jordan Morales.
Here.
We're not getting.
Jordan, we saw that you commented. We just can't hear it. So
We saw you.
Can you
We're not
hear
hearing
me?
anything.
Can you hear me?
Okay, try again.
Here.
All right. And there's Ryan Davidson too. Okay. Jerem Wagner. Mike Dittenberg.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Nicole Baird Spencer. John Evans.
Here.
Rob Fisher or Lee Belt. Joe Steer.
Here.
Todd Lavoie. Dave Teedy or Caleb Hood.
Here.
Mark Stewart.
Here.
Dale Reynolds. Kevin Nielsen.
Present.
Jason Brinkman or Mark Wasdahl. We do have a quorum.
all right. Thanks, Elaine. Are there any requests to change the agenda today before we move on to the consent agenda?
I do have a couple of things. So we have had a request to pull item C off the consent agenda to have a discussion about it. That's our FY25 performance reports. And we will have some public comment about that. I'd also like to, and I'll note that Jason Brinkman just joined us. I'd also like to note that we have 3 board members who aren't with us today who are retiring or otherwise moving on, and we'd like to wish them well and notice they're moving on. They all got a plaque at the Compass luncheon in December for those of you who were there. So that's Mayor Debbie Kling, Mayor Jerem Wagner, and Council Member Helen Russell from Eagle. We also have one of those members present with us today, and that's Mayor John Evans. And I want to recognize his 24 years on this board as he moves on to, we thought retirement, instead he got elected to the cemetery district. Congratulations. I'd also like to welcome a new member. Kevin Nielsen is a city council member from the city of Star. And in making a presentation to them at the end of the year, we had a discussion and he agreed to join the board. And Kevin, welcome. We're really excited to have more representation from the north side of the county.
Thanks, Elaine. So for item C, to pull off the consent agenda, do we need to move that to the regular agenda as like item number 1?
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Madam Chair,
yeah.
I would like to also do the same thing with D.
Oh, D. Any other requests? Anybody online? All right, so just to recap, we need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are action items that will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a VRT board member requests the item be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the under action items. So we've got 2 of those requests, C and D. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
That was Mayor McLean. That was Mayor McLean made the motion.
That was Mayor McLean. Thank you.
That's all right. And then Mayor Steer made the second. All right. Thank you all. So then moving on
We
to,
do have to do the vote on it.
oh, sorry, my bad. Okay. All those in favor say, again, I'm a little rusty. It's been like 3 weeks. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, thank you. All right, so then do we want to just jump into the performance reports, Elaine?
I think so. So first, I think we should probably take public comments because one of those was aimed at the performance reports. And I don't have a presentation prepared for those. I will note that they're found on pages 13 through 22 of your packet.
Great. Ken, did you want to come up and we're doing public comments. Is that what you wanted to do?
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, Ken, go for it.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Ken Pajan. I'm a resident of Boise City. First, I want to thank Mayor Kling, even though I understand she's not here, for many years of service on the VRT board and for asking thoughtful and incisive questions of the staff over the years. So thank you very much, Mayor Kling. Secondly, I understand many of you expressed concern earlier this year over my not appearing and commenting on the FY26 budget. I appreciate the concern very much and thank you for it. Move on to the FY25 ridership reports on pages 13 through 22 of your packet. You'll note on page 22 of the on page 22, Ada County fixed ride ridership is down 4.1% year over year. This is basically the Boise City system. Even though service levels increased, more service should mean more riders. Not in this case. FY25 levels are down about 17% compared to FY19 or the pre-pandemic ridership levels. These are your numbers, not mine. On-time performance continues to languish in the mid 70% range. City of Boise has poured tens of millions of dollars into the system over the last few years. What do Boise taxpayers have to show for that? Suggest nothing. Folks, I suggest you have a serious problem, one that needs to be dealt with urgency, especially since other transit systems have shown ridership increases, with some having almost returned to pre-pandemic levels. Moving on to the Transportation Development Plan, pages 98 through 183 of your packet. Several of the plans call for headways, the intervals between buses, of 7.5 minutes. This, of course, means costs doubling from the 15-minute headways, and based on my experience in Fort Worth, Texas, little gains in ridership to offset the increased costs. Proposed frequencies rival those of large transit systems in large urban areas with the population, and more importantly, population density and frequency, to justify those service frequencies. Philadelphia is an example of that. 7.5 minute frequencies cannot be justified in a low density population environment such as the Treasure Valley, especially when the current system struggles to maintain, let alone gain, ridership. It's time to rethink the 7.5 minute frequencies and can seriously consider dropping that idea. That concludes my comments. Thank you for your attention. I'm prepared to stand for questions.
Thanks, Mr. Pajan. Elaine?
Madam Chair, no questions, but some comments if I could, and then certainly a discussion by the board. So thank you for being here, Ken. It's good to see you. It's good to see that you're doing well. We always appreciate your attention to detail. What I would say about the ridership reports is this: we had a major service change in 2024. We knew going into that likely the immediate impact would be some loss of ridership. And then over the next 2 or 3 years after that, that ridership would grow again. I've already told my team in our executive management team meeting that we had at the end of the year that ridership has to be our focus this year. We know that the service change was a big change, and we also know that we designed it to increase ridership. Ridership is down in specific places and up in others, and we've looked at that pretty closely. We're going to look at it even more closely. Many of the places where we improved service to 15 or 30-minute levels are the places where we've seen a gain in ridership. Fairview Avenue and Overland Avenue stand out on those. The Route 42, which is an inter-county route that used to be peak hour and irregular, is now regular all day long. We've seen increased ridership on that one. We saw a decrease of ridership on, for instance, the Orchard, what used to be known as the Orchard route. It used to go downtown. It now goes crosstown. And the new riders, frankly, haven't discovered yet the benefits of being able to get from North Boise to the center of town, or actually all the way to the airport. Nor have they discovered the transfers that are now available to them to get them myriad places all over the valley. We've designed a new program called Route Reach, which is specific outreach on routes to the people who live and work and have businesses around them, to see if we can't attract the riders that we projected would be there. If that doesn't work, we'll examine the route and see if it needs changes. We intend to do that all over the system, and are confident, frankly, I'm still confident that we will, in fact, be able to grow ridership based on this service change. I would also like to note something. Ken brings some interesting experience to the table. He worked for Boise Urban Stages back when they were in the beginning of their service. In 1973, when Boise Urban Stages started, the census population for the city of Boise was 75,000 people. For the Ada County, all of Ada County, it was 112,000. City of Kuna was under 600. City of Star was under 200. City of Meridian was less than 2,300. City of Eagle was in 1980, when they reincorporated, was 2,600. It was a much different place then. And the revenue hours per capita were much different than what we have available today. And it's true that that system actually earned a lot of ridership. And it's exactly what we aspire to with the plan that Ken referenced with the 7.5 minute service. Those kinds of revenue hour per capita services can, in fact, earn a lot of ridership. I always point to the city of Spokane, which is exactly the same size as the city of Boise. Region of Boise has similar demographics, kind of a similar layout in a linear fashion, with the core city at one end of it. And they serve 10 million riders a year, and they have 3.5 times as many revenue hours per capita as we do. We believe that there's a lot of ridership growth if we can just get a little more revenue so that we can have more revenue hours per capita, and we certainly aspire to that. In terms of the 7.5-minute service, that's part of the Valley Connect plan, and yes, it is reflected in the transit development plan that's before us today. That's an aspirational goal in the future, recognizing that if we are to get to the revenue hours per capita that used to be available in the city of Boise when it was 75,000 people, we would be able to do something like that, but we can't do it today with revenue we have today. So we are working on ridership. We intend to focus on it all year. And by the end of the year, if ridership hasn't increased and people haven't responded, we'll be looking at those service models again.
Thanks, Elaine. Any questions for Ken or Elaine?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Daly.
just for Ken and for Elaine both. One, the statistics show some increases in certain places and types of transportation, and also shows, back to what you were saying, the revenue per capita. And for Ken, could you amplify on that? And then for Ken as well, in your experience back when, even at a lower population base, as Elaine mentioned, could you enlighten us on how, again, the per capita cost and how that was analyzed? Or could you help us as we analyze this in the future, not necessarily now, but comment briefly now and then help us in the future in helping us analyze that?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, actually, at that time, the company I was working for was part of the president of the company was also on the committee that was introducing what was then called the Section 15 reporting requirements, which are essentially basically pretty much the same as the reporting requirements that you have now. That became formal in about 78, those requirements by the feds, but we implemented them back in 76. So the statistics in that and the manner of reporting the statistics are pretty much the same as they are now. Population base back then, when I left in 1981, was 7,500,000. We hauled 1.1 million passengers. Fast forward to a population base in Boise, and I'm just talking Boise City here, of 235,000, and you have 900,000 roughly in ridership in the latest year. So per capita, the ridership is down, the cost is down. We recovered, and I have documentation to back this up, about 23% of the fare box. I believe now it's down to, Elaine can correct me, less than 8%. So the service we provided on some routes, we had 30-minute service all day because of scheduling and the way we did the scheduling of the routes, and that service ran from roughly 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It was Saturday service also, and there was one bus on Sunday that was being funded under a federal grant that ran for a couple of hours, and the productivity on that was actually fairly high. So did I answer your question?
Yes, you did, and I'd like to, at some point in time, to amplify that in conjunction with the staff.
Sure. So, Ken's correct that they had a lot of riders for that 75,000 population. The point I was trying to make is that as Boise grew, we didn't really grow revenue hours. We just spread those out to more spaces and with less frequency. And when that happens, it becomes less attractive and less easy to ride. And frankly, it doesn't surprise me that we haven't been able to attract as many, although our goal certainly is to do that. But my goal is to increase the number of revenue hours so that we can attract many more than that And that's the discussion we'll have later in the board meeting about whether or not we should daylight some legislation to begin having that discussion about how to get that revenue. So,
Thank you.
you bet.
I think, and as another fellow transportation, representing another transportation organization, I want to also preface that, the older development patterns of the decades that you were describing were inherently more transit friendly and more densely connected, right? Obviously, there was bigger distances between those communities, but when they existed, they were a lot closer together. So as our municipal partners continue to grow and approve development projects that make those trips harder to connect to, I think that is also a part of the piece of this puzzle here, right? The VRT can't magically just create routes that will support every single constituent in the counties that it serves if the land development patterns don't support it. It would be astronomically expensive and impractical from just a trip timing perspective, right? So I just want to, that's a foundational element that we're having to deal with in this environment now.
Madam Chair, one other point I guess I'd like to make is that brings up some of the places where we've had ridership growth include some of the on-demand parts of the system. And as this valley grows, especially as it grows in the land use pattern that it has been following, we see an opportunity to continue to grow connections to our fixed route system using better on-demand tools that are now available because technology has grown so much. We're experimenting beginning next month with commingling rides from the on-demand and the paratransit system in Canyon County and rides from the Beyond Access and paratransit system in Ada County to see if we can find more efficiencies in getting more people opportunities to ride, and especially to connect then to that frequent fixed route.
Are there any other folks that like to comment on this issue? Okay, and since it's an action item, we need to approve it, correct, Elaine, with motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion?
It's the motion. Okay. Madam Chair, I move we approve the FY25 performance report as presented.
Mayor Steer. Any other comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Moving on to the Gillig bus purchase, which was formerly item D on the consent agenda. Commissioner Daly, did you want to share your questions for us first?
My main couple of questions was the type of buses, and I think Elaine has an answer to that one, as well as the what buses we're replacing. And then one of the other questions is, it says these are outside, they're with an agreement according to a grant, and the purchase agreements is vacated, the normal purchase agreement. So kind of explain all of that.
Sure.
We'll let Leslie answer that.
So the buses that we're replacing are 35-foot compressed natural gas buses. We're replacing with the same type of vehicles. For the 2024 bus and bus facilities grant that we applied for, we partnered with Gillig at that point, which relieves us from having to do a full-on procurement, which is why we're purchasing directly through Gillig with that contract or that grant.
Follow up. So these buses, because they're all natural gas and replacing natural gas.
That's correct.
So we're not doing anything electric. Because I think Elaine explained to us earlier, we're kind of retrenching in terms of the numbers of electric versus other
Correct. We're going to look at purchasing some electric vehicles of the smaller size for more of the access door-to-door service, but we have to wait before we can purchase those. So we're shifting these to CNG, and then we'll continue with other battery electrics for the remainder of that grant.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item? All right, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the Gillig bus purchase as. Second.
Madam Chair, and that would be Resolution VBD 26007.
Any other comments on this item? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Do we still need to have just general public comment period? Is there anyone in person or online that would like to comment on anything? All right, with that, I'll close the public comment period. All right, we're going to move on to section 5. VA action item fiscal year 2026 budget amendment. This is a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Jason and Elaine. Okay. Oh, you don't, you do it that way.
So we'll have a presentation from our CFO, and then we'll open the public hearing for comments.
Yeah, apologies. I'm working on getting my screen shared. It is
You don't have the
so far
staff
not cooperating.
report.
Well, that is our staff report. Sorry.
Jason, would you mind giving me a hand real quick? It is not wanting to share.
For those of you online, we're trying to share the presentation.
Apologies. It's not even giving me the option.
There we go.
All right, sorry about that, everyone. My name is Jason Jedry, and I am here today to present the FY26 budget amendment number 1. This information can be found on pages 86 through 95 of your board packet. Need your assistance again. It won't change slides now. Sorry, guys. Staff requests that following the public hearing, the VRT board consider approval of resolution VBD 26-009 to adopt the FY26 budget amendment number 1. Budget amendment number 1 consists of carry forwards and new budget authority. Under the carry forwards, we have capital projects, planning projects, and subrecipient funding. For the new budget authority, we have the Farebox mobile ticketing system project and the Rides to Wellness program. Capital carry forwards total to just over $32 million. 21.4 million of that is specific to bus purchases. 8.6 million is specific to facility improvements. 545,000 is for IT and ITS projects. $1.3 million for bus stop improvements. Planning project carry forwards total to a little over $685,000. $313,000 of that is for planning and research projects. A little under $50,000 is for bus stop design, and a little over $322,000 is for the integrated fare payment system project. Subrecipient carry forwards total to a little over $1 million. And I just want to point out that this 100% of this is federally funded. The subrecipients themselves are responsible for providing any local match. $152,000 of that $1 million is for a Boise State vehicle. $307,000 is for BSU operating, $106,000 for an ACHD vehicle, $338,000 for Treasure Valley Transit operating, and $96,000 for Treasure Valley Transit capital. Onto the new and amended, that comes to a little over $1.4 million. Of that, $1.2 million is for the fare box replacement project. Just want to point out that the local funding has been identified for that at a 7.34% match rate. And I think if our memory serves me correctly, it's about $92,000 of local match. And the Rides to Wellness program at $150,000, and the local funding for that has been provided by St. Luke's and St. Alphonsus. If you look at this table on the left-hand side under adopted, that was our original adopted FY26 budget. The next column over that says amendment number 1, that is the budget including this entire budget amendment. And the column on the far right is the difference between those two. As you can see, the budget amendment totals to $35,151,000. $2.5 million of that you'll see in regional overhead. And the $2.5 million number consists of the planning carry forwards, bus stop and bus shelter projects, and the subrecipient operating expenses. $150,000 in specialized transportation services is for the Rides to Wellness program. And the remaining $32.4 million is the capital projects, including the subrecipient pass-through for the 2 vehicles and Treasure Valley Transit capital. And with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions anyone may have.
And just a quick comment, if I could, most of the capital is stuff that has been in the pipeline for some time, but we were unable to actually complete it last year. Two examples, the construction and bus purchases for Main Street Station, which total about $18 million. Most of that is now completed and paid for, but the budget was actually in last year's budget instead of this year's, for instance. The other capital projects are similar. And then as Jason noted, the one new project that will simplify and modernize our fare payment, we've been able to identify STBG funds at a much lower match rate to complete that. And if we go forward with it now, it will be a lot cheaper than if we were to wait and rebid it. We were unable to complete it last year.
Thanks, Jason and Elaine. Any questions from the board? Yeah, Commissioner Healy.
Madam Chair, thank you. I promised you I was going to ask some questions, so I guess I better. But to reiterate what you said, the 1.4 million, which is the new, the other is just ongoing, moving forward, correct?
Correct.
And the 1.4 is the new money, and that's a grant as well, correct?
It is, yes. STBG funding.
Except for the match. The match was St. Luke's and St. Al's?
No, that was for the Rides to Wellness program. The 1.4 million is for the fare box replacement project.
Okay.
And remember that every year we budget for a 15% off the top from Compass for STBG funds. So we've already budgeted for and collected, I think, most of that local match.
Okay, that's for the 92,000.
Correct.
match came from. That was my question, is where it came from. I was confused about the St. Luke's and St. L's, that's why. So this is for specialized services, correct?
The rights to wellness or the one?
Rights to wellness.
Rights to wellness, yes, correct.
So that's one of the only places that's increased based on your statistics, that's increased in specialized services. So is this basically $150,000 of local money well spent?
So the match on this one will come from the healthcare sector. And so we're actually providing more rides for no extra money for us. The rest of it is federal.
So is there a way we can increase that, I guess is my point, in terms of the there's clearly a service that's being provided and it's increasing.
Well, we've been, I think, extremely fortunate that our healthcare sector recognizes the benefit of that and has been willing to increase the local match so that we could utilize more federal funding than we've been able to otherwise.
Right, and just
We're trying. Yes, we are increasing. That's why the addition.
and we're working with the hospitals on their community benefit report to us. So that's why I was asking that question. So it's an example of the kind of thing we're working together to try to resolve. So, and this is a place, like I said, that statistically is increasing, and healthcare is one of those places where we desperately need to provide service to our community. So, thank you.
Any other questions on this budget amendment?
Public hearing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone, a member of the public that's online or in person that would like to comment on the budget amendment? All right, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And so the requested action is that we would approve Resolution VBD 26-009 and adopt the budget amendment as presented. Is there a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move approval of Resolution VBD 26-9. And, whoops, I forgot the last part of it. As presented.
Thanks, Mayor McLean. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? I just want to echo and flag to staff, congratulations on these big grants. This is really, really exciting. Normally don't see these types of big budget adjustments. So just, yeah, congratulations, and excited to see what comes out of, especially those capital funds in particular. So
Thank you.
congratulations.
Appreciate it.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to echo that. Congrats to the staff, and also a thank you to the hospital systems for being that match that makes it possible for us to take advantage of more funds to provide service.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. And just a friendly reminder to turn on your guys' mics when you're. Okay, great. All right, item 5B, it's the public hearing for we've got two of
Oh,
them.
yeah, yeah,
So
they're
the
all
same.
together.
They're together. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. So we don't need a separate motion. I don't see a resolution on this second item, B.
Sorry, Madam Chair, our agenda tracks a little bit differently. We have the budget amendment staff presentation, then we have the public hearing, then we have the vote. So we already did item B.
Got it. Great. All right, so then we're going to move on to section 6. That is the executive board elections for 2026.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That would be me. So the staff report is on page 96 and 97. I did not do a presentation. By our bylaws, we are required for the board to elect the members of the executive committee following resolutions by the various bodies to elect those members to our board. This is always an awkward timing. Most of those resolutions will follow our meeting today. So recognize that the group that we have before us is prospective. And if for some reason that resolution is not forthcoming, we'll have to punt and do Plan B. But if we don't do these elections today, we'll not have a quorum for our executive board meeting in February. So what we're proposing is that we elect 2 members that have yet to be confirmed to the board through that resolution. That would be the new mayors of both Nampa and Caldwell, Eric Phillips and Rick Hogeboom. And we're proposing, because of the timing of that, that we not name a secretary treasurer today. So you'll see there's 12 slots on this nomination list. And the idea would be that we would not elect a 12th member, but we'd take one of the at-large members in Canyon County at some point before April and after those resolutions have been passed, and name them the secretary treasurer for that open position. Councilmember Jordan Morales has agreed to continue acting as secretary treasurer until such time that we can fill that. So the slate before you is the slate that we're proposing. As always, the other officers on the slate just move up in succession. So for instance, Alexis Pickering, who was last year's chair-elect, would be chair. Dale Reynolds will move from vice chair to chair-elect, and Jordan Morales will move from secretary treasurer to vice chair, and Lauren McLean will move from chair to past chair. Any questions? I might also mention the rest of the board, and thank you for Star for acting so precipitous, so quickly. The rest of the board will also have some new members. Those members will be appointed by resolution over the next month or two. Those include members from Eagle and at least one other. I can't remember exactly who, but the board doesn't weigh in on those. Just those jurisdictions determine that that's the person they'd like to represent them.
Well, Madam Chair, if I could, I appreciate the willingness that each of these people named on the slate has to fill in these roles. I've enjoyed my position working closely with Elaine and her team this last year. And thank you, Alexis, Commissioner Pickering, for stepping in next. If it's appropriate, I'm ready and willing to make a motion that we approve the executive board positions as listed in the packet.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Mayor Steer. Thanks, Mayor McLean. I'll just, for discussion, I'll just say, yeah, I've been on the board for 5 years now, I think. It's hard to believe. And so I've been very, very passionate about how ACHD and Valley Regional Transit interconnect as partners, and we've grown a lot together in the last few years, exponentially in the last 3, I would say. And so I'm really excited about this role, if confirmed by all of you, and just being able to support Valley Regional Transit and Elaine and the team and all the ways that we need to realize transit in our region. Because I think it's just a tremendous opportunity. We have this incredible resource, a great team, and I think it takes dedicated folks of different perspectives. And that's also why I'm really excited about working with Councilman Dale Reynolds as well on this, because I think it takes a regional approach to solve these big challenges. So leave it at that. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Chair, if I could, also I'd like to thank Mayor McLean for her services last year. I think we've made a lot of progress, and her willingness to step up to the plate and work hard has been a big part of that. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
you. Okay, moving on to 6B, it's the Transit Development Plan, TDP, 2026 for 2023-30 adoption. Mr. Street. And Stephen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it'll be a team presentation today. I'll take the lead. Kyle's here to answer any detailed questions. I don't know if Elaine, if you wanted to have any initial comments, but we are excited to be here to present to you on the Transit Development Plan. This is a, let me see, my turn to not know what I'm doing. There we go. This is an action item, and we are requesting that the Board of Directors approve Resolution VBD 2611, which would adopt the FY 26 to 30 Transit Development Plan. The presentation today is going to go over what that TDP development process was like. We'll review what the local funding requests are, and then summary and request your action on that. The Transportation Development Plan, though, is a 5-year capital and service plan. We work really hard with our funding partners to understand what their needs are, and we schedule out what those needs would look like in terms of funding requests and service levels. It includes all of the services that we support, all the capital improvements that we plan on doing over the next 5 years. It also includes all of the the special services, some that were mentioned earlier today. Those types of projects and programs are all outlined in the Transit Development Plan. And those talk about what our expenses are, and then we look at what our available revenues are and come up with the assessment requests that we make for each of our funding partners.
And remember, these are projected assessment requests that are built into this plan, so all of us can utilize it for budget planning.
Right. This today marks the capstone, I guess, of a long period of time in developing this transit development plan. We'll get into a little bit more about how this coordinates with each of your budget development processes and the input that we get from our funding partners. But just wanted to highlight that the formal process began back in the winter and spring of 24-25. That's when we began talking with each of our funding partners about what their interests were in investments over the next couple of years. We followed the FY 26 budget cycle all through the summer of 2025. In the fall, we matched the TDP to what those final budgets were for FY 26. We made a couple of updates to the Board of Directors throughout, including in October, and then took this to the RAC in November. We had our last update to the Executive Board last month, and today we have this in front of you for consideration. Actually, let me back up if I can. So the transit development, the main thing that I hope you're catching with all of this is the transit development plan. It gives us this opportunity to map out over the next 5 years what our service and capital expenses and projects are going to be and how they will impact the residents of Ada and Canyon County. And the reality is, though, all of that work is dependent on voluntary contributions of our funding partners. Without that, none of the work that we do would be possible. And because those local funds are voluntary, it's really critical that VRT and this TDP reflect the interests and capabilities of our funding partners. So we need to develop the TDP in a really collaborative way. And why are those funding contributions voluntary? This gets a little bit into some of the other things that we've been talking about for our legislative action, but currently we are entirely dependent on voluntary local contributions because we don't have, as an organization, VRT does not have any direct funding authority. That makes us unique in the state in terms of bodies that are created by the state that don't have any direct ability to raise funds. It also makes us unique in the country where we don't have that authority to either directly get funding from those that we serve or have state funding to support it. But we still, 44% of our total revenues each year comes from local sources. So we're entirely dependent on those local revenues. And it's really important as we forecast what those expenses are and services are, that's done in partnership with our funding partners, and that our requests are data-driven and transparent. And we do that through a 4-step process, which we'll get into in a little bit later. But we make sure that the funding requests we make of each of our funding partners is done in a transparent and data-driven way. Before we get to the distribution of expenses, though, we work closely with our partners to understand what they want. And how do we get that input? We get that through at least 3 different sources. There are directly VRT-led outreach efforts, and those come in a variety of formats, like what we did with Valley Connect 2.0 when we're looking long into the future. Where do we want to go? What do our communities want? We had over 1,200 responses when we last went out for VC 2.0 public comments on what the public was looking for. Every time we do service changes, we get feedback from the public, both those that directly use the service, but also our funding partners on what they're able to support. And so that gives us frequent input from both funding partners and the public. We regularly get hundreds of comments on those when we do large service changes. Then just this last year, another example was our Canyon County Transit Day, where we had over 200 responses from the public on that, which we worked closely with our Canyon County partners on understanding what the public wanted and what our Canyon County funding partners were able to bring in terms of ongoing revenue. Every year we work with partners such as Compass to get input from each of our funding partners. So Compass does their annual outreach. We're at each of those meetings, so we touch each of our funding partners in cities to understand what your needs are from a transportation perspective writ large, and also specifically for transit. And then each year when we do our annual budget process, we send out emails, we have phone calls, we make presentations to each of our funding partners to understand, making sure that you all understand what we're requesting and making sure that we're including all of the things that you're interested in our annual budgets. We also have direct agency engagement that might be outside of either of those previous avenues, where we're working directly with our funding partners, holding public hearings, or working with staff and leadership at each of the organizations to understand what it is that you are interested in. What role do you want transit to play to support your constituents or your organization? All of that gets bundled together in the projects that we include in the Transportation Development Plan. We also get direct feedback from our boards. As we went through this process, we heard from both our board and our funding partners that we needed to limit the growth of our local contributions. We've done that with this TDP. We'll get into what that means in a minute, but we also heard that it was important that the TDP be much more accessible, that you're able to see what it is that we're requesting funding for and how those projects support or impact the funding partners. And we've done a lot of that with this TDP, making it easier for you to understand why are we requesting the funding that we are in each year. We also were requested to break out our ongoing capital from discretionary capital. So there's a lot more visibility into how our capital program works over the coming years, whether those are to do things like replacing buses that are necessary for ongoing operation, or if they are for more discretionary types of improvements, whether that be on our maintenance facilities or bus stops. We've broken out the capital from our ongoing capital from discretionary. And we also are ready to show what those capital requests would look like, whether they are done year by year, or if we pool them into a capital pool and average those requests over the 5-year term of the transit development plan.
And the reason to average those is to, so for budget planning purposes, instead of the requests being lumpy, they can be more gradual increases year over year.
Kyle reminded me that the other category for capital is in contingent projects. So these are things that actually are not in the TDP, but they're not programmed in the TDP, but these are things that we want to make sure that you all are aware of, that we're working towards, and that can move from that contingent category into a programmed as we work with each of our funding partners to identify whether or not that is in their financial plans. So in summary, the overview of what our TDP investments are over the next 5 years is maintaining our existing services, essentially. And what that looks like is almost 1.5 million trips are completed by the services that we support on the 19 fixed routes. We provide on-demand services in a number of ways, whether that be through paratransit services or the VRT on demand in Canyon County, the Beyond Access service, which we launched a couple of years ago, and the Rides to Wellness program, which we talked about earlier, making important connections to individuals who need to access healthcare. We have seen a lot of growth actually in the Lyft services. These are first and last mile connections, helping people get to the fixed route services. We increased that service area on the Lyft Pass program with this last service change to help mitigate any loss of coverage with the changes that we made to the service network. We've also expanded the service area of the Lyft VRT late night service, which helps provide services in low demand areas, but to important trips of people trying to get to and from work after our hours of service are over. We support safe routes to school in both Ada and Canyon County. There are 11 different specialized programs that we support throughout Ada and Canyon County, touching essentially all of our funding partners. We support van pool services by supporting vehicle replacements, and also all of the transit demand management programs, where we're encouraging people to take alternative modes of transportation through Ridetober and May in Motion. We maintain customer service locations, 3 different locations here in Meridian, in Boise, and in Caldwell. We maintain 2 different maintenance yards where all of our vehicles are maintained and prepared for service. And we have 3 main transit centers at Happy Day Transit Center, Main Street Station, and Town Square Mall. All of those things are what we are proposing to maintain and continue throughout this next TDP. As mentioned, we are limiting the increase in local funding requests by limiting the TDP to maintaining existing services and facilities. That means our local contribution, taken as a whole, doesn't grow more than 3.5% per year on average. And we are doing that also by both limiting our expenses, but also increasing our earnings. So our earnings, which are coming from advertising and other revenues, those increase nearly 6% per year, totaling over almost $400,000 by the year 2030. Almost $400,000 by 2040. Excuse me, by 2030, which is the end of the TDP. So we're doing everything we can to remain fiscally responsible with this TDP, making sure that we don't get out ahead of ourselves, either in terms of provision of service or in terms of what our funding partners are able to support. So with that, we wanted to get into how we come up with these local funding requests and go through a brief overview of how do we go from the services we provide to the funding requests that we make of each of our partners. I mentioned at the beginning, we follow a data-driven process that is focused on ensuring that we have a fair distribution of requests from our funding partners, and that we do that through this 4-step process. begins by identifying what all of our expenses are. So as I mentioned, the TDP looks at service and capital costs. And we total up all of those expenses and we subtract any of the revenues that we get, whether that be federal revenue, local revenue, federal revenue, or earned revenue. And from that, from those expenses and subtracting the non-local revenues, we identify what is the local share that remains. And then we distribute that local share based on combination of population and where services provided. So each of our funding partners contribute according to the amount of service that we provide to that community or the population that is the regional share of population in that community. So I'm just running through this. If you all have any questions throughout, please interrupt me. But where we wanted to get to next was in the TDP, we have a number of different views. So this is looking at page 107 in your packet. The point is we have for each of our funding partners, the total requests that we will be making for 26 through 2030. So the reason that this is so important is because this helps each of you as you're doing your financial planning over the next couple of years to understand what it is that you should be expecting to see from VRT in terms of funding requests. We do this both total, so you could look up how much does VRT expect to request of each of our funding partners in any of the given years between 26 and 30. We then break that down by partner, by year into the different categories of whether that be general, which is you can imagine that being your overhead, services. So this would be service that supports fixed route or on-demand services, capital. So this is anything that is that ongoing capital. And then the contingent capital you can see in there, that's capital that is not included in your funding request, but are things that we're
Stephen,
would like to discuss. Yes.
I mean, could we get rid of that block on the top of the screen that's covering up?
This is a question for Jason.
Thank you, Mayor Steer. That was bugging me too.
Well, yeah, now you can see what I'm talking about. So I appreciate that. So we have capital broken out in terms of the ongoing. That's what's showing in the regular capital and the contingent. These were things that we want to talk to each of our funding partners about funding. They're not included at the moment in your annual funding requests. And then you can see the total to the right for each of those years. So this takes your overview and breaks it down into those categories of general service, capital, contingent, and special. You can see here 3 different examples. This is Ada County Highway District, and then Boise State University. Each of our funding partners have a slightly different mix of requests that we make. The Highway District, for example, Ada County Highway District doesn't have any direct service contributions, but we do work with, as was mentioned by Commissioner Pickering, we have been working closely with the Highway District on specific capital projects, and those might show up as either special. I mean, eventually they would show up as special. Right now they're showing up as contingent because we have not yet had a definitive conversation to program that $130,000, for example, in 2028. But this is intended to help support all of those conversations. And then Boise State University, they support each of our categories, whether that be general service, capital, or special. Special in this case supports the PASS program, for example, and other partners have other special things that they're contributing to. And so you can look at those.
Special is typically regional passes, so members of that entity get to ride the services for that fee. Or the other is some partners support specialized services. For instance, in Meridian, they support much of the Beyond Access and Senior Center service.
Before Stephen moves on to the next page, I wanted to point out with the contingent, because this is really important and we do want to move towards these projects, that a part of your packet for those that have contingent projects and amounts in there, there is an appendix describing those projects. the partners, the amounts, and what the plans are. And so you can find that in page 63.
Commissioner Daly?
He anticipated my question.
Good job. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. And these are examples of ways that we've improved the transparency of the TDP. The previous version did not have this broken out in the same way. Especially this section. So again, going from high level, this is the total of request. This is how that total request is broken out by the categories. And then we look at each of those. There are 2 pages for each funding partner. This is in Appendix A, pages 117 to 145 in your packet, where you can look for each funding partner by year, how those assessments are broken out. That's the same as what we saw earlier, but then we can see how those assessments were determined. That's what the assessment rates are, which you see down below under assessment rates, whether that be general, capital, or service, the percentages of service that are applied to each funding partner, and how we come up with the numbers on top. All of the special assessments will also be called out. So that this is a City of Boise example. You can see that the special assessment that we'll be anticipate requesting throughout the term of this TDP is for script, $30,000 each year. And so you have this level of detail for each of our funding partners. We also highlight the services that they're supporting or that serve that community. So in this case, this is showing all the fixed route services that touch the City of Boise. And it's these services that then drive the percentages that we saw in the assessment percentages. And then also not only the fixed route services, but also the specialized services, whether that be paratransit, rides to wellness, or the PASS programs, the VRT lift programs. And then on the capital side, for each year, we break out what the capital project is and how much we're requesting of the funding partner for that specific capital project. The important thing to note here, remember, we started with all the expenses, we took out our revenues, and then we distributed all the local that we needed to all of our funding partners. These totals here aren't the total for the project. These are just the total for each funding partner. So this is your share of the local portion of the project. And so it helps you understand what your money is going towards. We have another view that looks at the total cost of each project. And then as mentioned, Kyle mentioned the contingent projects. Not only is there in Appendix F do you have a list of all the contingent projects and their total amounts. If there are any contingent projects for any of our funding partners, they are called out in that 2-page summary along with the years that they could be implemented. Again, the whole point of all of this is to make sure that what our requests are of our funding partners is clear and transparent, and that it can be programmed as you guys are doing each of your annual budget building.
We also reorganized it. It used to be that all of this detail was mixed throughout the plan, and we tried to put all of the plan material up front, and then this detail in the appendixes. So with a good table of contents, so you could go find it as it applied to you. So hopefully that will help all of you be able to decipher how it impacts your entity.
Thanks, Elaine. In fact, if you look at the table of contents in the TDP, you'll notice that the full non-appendix portion of the TDP is less than 20 pages, and that includes all of the high-level components, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different appendices. Appendix A is the one that's going to provide you the highest level of detail for each of the funding partners, and then we get into the other appendices that talk about the project lists and other components. But yes, the intent is to make this a lot easier for our funding partners to get into and understand how what's in here supports your constituents and how it results in the funding requests that we're making each year.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Councilman Nielsen.
I'm curious if there's a viewpoint that we could see or could be developed. I know you're talking about funding based on miles of service, population, things like that, but service hours, ridership, subsidy per trip for the membership jurisdictions. Do you have that data, or can you get that data?
And Madam Chair, when we go back to our annual budget processes, those are typically the kinds of conversations we have with each individual jurisdiction. And we are working on having that information more available. But yes, we work with each of our funding partners to help them understand those types of details. They're not called out in the TDP in terms of, let's say, subsidy per trip or ridership in each individual jurisdiction, but that is information that we make available.
How would I get that information then? Is that just part of the presentation that would come to the city, or?
Typically, yes. Yep.
Typically, we do it that way because each of the cities or other partners are different enough that we gather that information specifically for them. Trying to create a table that has all of it for everyone is a little daunting all at once. So we try to do it individually as we make presentations to each of the partners.
Thank you.
So in summary, what we're here for you today to consider is, with this transportation development plan that covers 26 to 30, we believe that we've been able to respond to our stakeholder interests in terms of increasing the visibility and legibility of the TDP. We've also maintained the requests of our funding partners within the tolerances we've discussed with our funding partners. We've done that by maintaining our existing services, not including expansion services in the TDP itself. Although, as was mentioned by Ken earlier, there are expansion projects that are listed in Appendix F. As we're looking to the future about what could our next steps be, those are included in here. They are not programmed. They're in anybody else's plan. These would all be unfunded projects, but they're there for conversation and consideration. But they are not included in the funded program and wouldn't move forward without additional conversation with our funding partners. That's one of the ways we've been able to make sure that we limit the growth of contributions. We've also took a close look at what our expenses are and tried to minimize those as much as possible. We've also increased the amount of earned revenue coming into the pool so that we are able to limit any increase in our local funding requests. And we're excited about the role that this document, with its improved legibility, can play in improving multi-year coordination with each of our funding partners. That, I'd stand for any additional questions before we.
If I could just offer a couple of other comments before those questions. So just remember, this document is a planning document. The purpose of it is so that we can plan with you on our budget requests and that you have some idea going forward what the expectation is, not just this year, but 3 or 4 years in the future, to understand if that's the contribution level that you want to be at. And then be able to have discussions around that, what it means. The other, to me, important point to remember, I remember, gosh, how long ago has it been now, when ACHD first started producing their 5-year plan. And for the first couple of times through it, how much conversation there was, what it meant, how it could be used. And now it's just the way that we all do business with ACHD so that we can plan ahead. We're hoping that this document becomes that. We're proposing to do it every 2 years rather than every year because our needs, I think, are direct enough that we can do it that way and still be effective. So If you approve this today, we're not asking you to say, yes, I'm committing my jurisdiction to pay that local match in that year. What we're asking you to do is look at this and say, yes, is a fair way to represent what VRT is going to need to be able to continue the services that they offer today. And I believe it's a fair way for me to begin budget discussions on whether or not my jurisdiction is willing to make that voluntary contribution.
Commissioner Daly?
Yes, my question is, dovetails with what Elaine was just saying. How dynamic is this process in terms of like uncertainty of federal funding, uncertainty of local contributions, all of those uncertainties, and then as you dialogue with us, the contributors at the local level, what it means to us, back to what Star's question was, what am I going to tell my individual constituents in my Star, Eagle, wherever? What are they getting out of this? Because that's part of the most often asked question to me is, obviously people don't like to pay taxes if they don't have to, but the most often asked question is, how are you spending those dollars?
Madam Chair, thank you for that question. Nothing in the TDP supersedes our annual budget process. So this is, as Elaine was mentioning, this is a planning, a guiding document. It's intended for us to have better conversations when we come to that budget discussion. And it's, believe me when I tell you that we've worked hard to try and make sure that what we have in this 5-year plan looks as good as we can right now from everybody's input as to what we think we will expect of everybody over the next 5 years. But yes, it will change each year through the annual budget process, and then it'll get updated every other year, as Elaine mentioned, into another 5-year outlook. It'll just roll forward another 2 years. And that's when you would see like any of those changes formally updated in the TDP. But each year, our budget process will kind of true up to what each of our funding partners is able and capable of doing.
Just I think follow-up question to Commissioner Daly's point. So for those of you that aren't as familiar, ACHD, we do a 5-year plan. It lists out all the projects in that 5-year plan and which ones are going to be in design or in concept. But we just recently approved our 20-year CIP, which I feel like is a little bit similar to this in terms of not necessarily in like the specifics of the projects, but I think coming back to Commissioner Daly's point about the frequency. So we only approve that CIP every 4 years, but we can often do it earlier than that. The 4 years is what's in our statute. And so I'm wondering, because I think similarly, if we were to get a large grant or something like that, of course, your budget would be updated with that. But I think oftentimes what happens at ACHD, not saying this is the right fit for you guys, but there's usually some type of item that comes on the agenda that says, hey, this is going to be updated because this funding came in that's adjusting this in this plan. And so I think like that transparency is really going to be helpful, especially because you're going to have to be approving this in a 2-year plan, 2-year increments. And then it also builds more, I think, excitement too amongst the board, because then we can see all these really great developments from multiple angles and not just when we approve the budget or not just when we do one of these one-off pieces that intersects with that budget improvement, I'll say more optimistically, right? So that I think just to kind of, I think there is some value in daylighting some of those updates. Not that you need to reapprove all of I don't know, if there is a way to find some type of hybrid there, Stephen, I think there's value there. I don't want to I'm not telling you to overcomplicate or add more work. However, more transparency is nice.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Daly.
just as an amplification of what Commissioner Pickering was saying, part of the dynamic I was talking about is what happened with the Eckerd Bridge as an example. We meaning Ada County, had that on our request for the 5-year plan for Ada County Highway District. they didn't, in their evaluation, didn't put it there. Well, in the investigation they did last year, they found there was an urgency beyond what they thought was going to be in their 5-year plan. They made the adjustments, thankfully. We all worked together to make that happen. That's what I'm talking about, the dynamic part of it. If there was some way that you could show that dynamic nature of what we're talking about that would meet the needs of a star growing community versus Ada County, rural Ada County, that kind of a dynamic that would meet the needs of both of them, but also give the spot on dynamic nature of it.
One thing I guess I would respond to you about that is that that's why we created the contingent category, because we know there are things out there that we need to be working on that are on our radar, some of which are not in this plan. For instance, knowing that we need to figure out a better way to serve the northern edge of the valley. That plan is not fully developed yet. And so my expectation would be that as time goes on, that contingency category will be the place where that dynamism happens. And as those things either pan out or we decide that maybe there's a better way to do it, they'll either move into the plan itself, into the program itself, or they'll drop off. Does that make some sense?
Madam Chair,
Oh, yeah, Councilman Nielsen.
if I could just follow on to that, I appreciate both the comments of you, Elaine, and Commissioner Daly. STAR hasn't been at this table for a long time, and I'm here today specifically to include STAR in a real way, and especially consider what does service concepts look like along state highways that really help move traffic through our town. 70% of the traffic in STAR originates outside of STAR. We feel it. I know Eagle feels it, and everybody downstream, right? And I appreciate this plan and the discussion of these long-term funding tools. And I really think that as we discuss these tools and put the plan together, that the plan has to support and demonstrate equitable and measurable service outcomes across the district. And I appreciate your focus on data-driven. That's really where I'm going to show up and push for is more data. And like Commissioner Daly said, I've got to be able to go back to my constituents and demonstrate that if STAR starts participating in the membership and contribution of funds to this, that there's a real benefit and a real outcome that's meaningful for our community.
Yeah, and I wanted to respond earlier to you asking about the having details of ridership and stuff in the plan. I know City of Star right now doesn't contribute to service and capital, but for those that do, I think Mark Stewart would be the perfect example of somebody that could probably benefit from being able to go back to his staff, show them what the capital projects are, show them what the portions of the capital projects are. Then we go back and forth with the ridership numbers and if they're up and down. And I know we've sent data back and forth to the city of Nampa through countless emails. And so I think you need this plan in order to be able to put that data to work instead of just looking at the end result of the number.
I have a more ACHD specific question. So is the 130,000, is that connected to our raise build grant?
Madam Chair, no, that is not. That's related to the planned capital project at State and Bogart.
Okay. So we're not including, so we haven't included.
Well, Madam Chair, you would like to poke at that, I'm sure. And it's
It's just, it happens to be in my district.
No, right.
So I'm very, very committed to seeing those dollars spent.
As are we. What I want you to understand though, with this transportation development plan and what we anticipate, all of our transit development plans, these are talking about, maybe you could think of it as new money. So the RAISE project is already kind of funded in a year that is, this project was intended to talk about how are we building our budgets for future years and what are the local requests of our funding partners in those out years. It gets, when we have multi-year grants that we budget for, let's say in a past year, but still haven't been delivered yet. Those are kind of like the carry forward stuff that we talked about a minute ago.
Mm.
Those are not layered on top of this right now. Think these are, maybe you could think of it as clean, forward-looking stuff. So
Gotcha.
So maybe an easier way to explain that, when we go after a discretionary grant, we get an agreement with whoever the local partners are that are going to participate in that to help with the local match. We go after that discretionary grant. In the case of the RAISE grant, we were successful. We've got the NEPA done. We're ready to go to construction. We haven't started construction yet, but our funding partners have already made a commitment to that local match whenever that construction begins. So we're not asking for it again.
I'm sure that the other folks will probably have that question. So
I'm sure there are, and we have tended to handle that through reconciliation, an annual reconciliation on where we are with existing capital projects as opposed to a forward-looking funding plan, which is what the TDP is intended to represent.
but I think also it doesn't, to your point, it's forward-looking, but it doesn't speak to the whole financial picture. Is that what I'm understanding? I mean, that's how I'm kind of, and as it relates to this grant, right? Because that is a huge portion. It's part of our support, but it's
Yeah.
not incorporated in that.
Could you repeat your question though? I missed it.
It seemed, so to me, the TDP is like as Elaine was saying, it's a forward-looking financial picture,
Yes.
but it's not the whole picture.
The way I would respond to that is the only thing that is not included are existing projects that have already been budgeted for. Otherwise, it is intended to be complete, yes.
Thank you. Yes, Jason.
I'd like to, applaud the efforts here to put forth the transparency and predictability and responsiveness to stakeholders. I think it's been really good work on this. And this question comes late, but I guess I'm wondering whether we have the right title on the plan. There's a lot of different titles used: improvement plan, work plan, et cetera. My understanding is that this is the entire revenue picture, and so there's a significant portion of this that's operating expenses. The inference to me as a development is new investment or expansion. So maybe we need to add an O in there or something. Is this the transit development and operations plan or the work plan? As you're working with all your stakeholders, I'd hate for there to be an implication that this is just expansion work. And I think it's, to the contrary, more just maintaining the status quo. For good or for bad, I think that's the necessary situation we're in. So maybe there's something in the name.
Green flag.
I appreciate that comment. It's interesting. When we first developed this plan, we sort of fashioned it on other agencies, and most of those have their operations already covered, if you will, by their ongoing dedicated funding. So I certainly take that under advisement. Thanks.
Anyone online? Questions for staff? Anybody else? Mayor Steer, Mayor Evans, okay. All right. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Kyle. All right, is there a motion? Looking for someone on this side of the room.
Madam Chair, I would move that we approve VBD 26-011 Transit Development Plan.
Thank you, Mayor Steer. Is there a second?
Second, this is Mike Dittenberg.
Thanks, Mike. Any other discussion?
I have one comment.
Yes.
I like Jason's idea, Madam Chair. I like to throwing operations in there somehow. So can we qualify it with that in the motion?
Mayor Steer?
I'm sorry, what was the?
Just qualify considering a different title for the document.
Exploring that.
Can be. I'll say yes.
And second, still, correct? Mark, no.
Mike,
good.
yes, I
Thanks,
agree to
thank you.
that.
Thanks, Mike, for seconding that. All right, thanks, Mark. Anybody else? Great discussion. Thank you all. Great job, team. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to the Canyon County Vanpool Program Authority Delegation. Stephen.
I am very excited to have a TDOP, Transit Development and Operations Plan. That's
Like, leave it to ITD to give us a bigger acronym. I was like, okay.
I would point out that that's the second title recommendation from ITD for the Transit Development Plan. So we take any input always.
For what it's worth, we've been cutting things out of our titles, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stephen Hunt again, Chief Development Officer. This is an action item, and we are asking the Board of Directors to consider delegating authority to the VRT Executive Board to approve a contract for a turnkey vanpool program in Canyon County. The presentation is going to go over a little bit the ACHD commuter ride program, why we are looking for a Canyon County specific solution, what the scope of work of the project is, and the project schedule. So just a quick word on the existing vanpool program in the Treasure Valley. ACHD commuter ride is the longest running multi-vehicle vanpool in the country with 50 years of operations. It provides service to, in, and through Ada County. And that's per state statute. They have over 86 vanpool routes, over 800 riders using it. And there is service in Canyon County, and the Canyon County vanpool would be complementary to the work that Commuter Ride is doing. But why do we need anything specific in Canyon County? Because of the state statute that limits Commuter Ride to, through, and from service that's to, through, and from Ada County, there are some travel that isn't covered. So anything within Canyon County is a service gap, or anything that is, say, Payette County to Canyon County, Owyhee County to Canyon County, or Canyon County to Oregon, Ontario, or Ontario to Canyon County. All of those types of trips would not qualify under the ACHD commuter ride model. And there are a number of large industrial employers in Canyon County that we're trying to support, and we hear about this from our funding partners. So the purpose of this turnkey Canyon County program would be to address that service gap. It would leverage the way we've structured this. It would also leverage public-private partnerships. And in this particular case, we're looking to partner with, take advantage of private vanpool operators' local contributions. So we just had the whole conversation in TDP and identifying local share. We would be looking to leverage the contributions of a vanpool operator, not requiring additional local contributions from the jurisdictions where the service would be provided. So the proposal for a turnkey operation, and this proposal is currently out on the street. I think it closes in a couple of weeks, but the proposal is that we are seeking a turnkey vanpool provider that would own and operate and maintain all of the vans. They provide all the necessary insurance and licensing. We would support, but they would also conduct sales and outreach in Canyon County. We would make sure that outreach is done in a way that is consistent with VRT messaging and branding, as well as ACHD commuter ride branding and messaging. They would be doing all of the NTD reporting and would ensure that there's sufficient ADA accessible vans. And in sum, this would build on the vanpool culture that's already in the Treasure Valley and extend that to Canyon County. Our project schedule, this has roots that go all the way back to 2022 or beyond, earlier, but in April of 22, we completed a regional van pool study, which identified and specified this gap in service. In December of this year, we did issue an RFP for van pool services that builds on the findings of that regional van pool study. We're here today to have the board consider delegating that authority that we to the executive board. We anticipate bringing that to the executive board in February for their consideration, after which we would finalize that contract, and startup would be scheduled for May of 2026. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Stephen, I have oodles, but looking at our time, I think I'm probably going to just focus on one, or two. Assuming that we approve this today, all right, sorry if I missed it, but when's the timeline to close the RFP? Like when we see who's going to be
Madam Chair, it's the middle of January. We are scheduled to have that available for the February executive board meeting.
Okay, great. Because I think I'm just wondering about co-location of some of our sites, in Canyon County. How can we, well, first of all, I'm very excited about this. I think there's room for all of us to play in. I think that this is a really important service that folks from the western part of the state haven't had access to, given our limits that we have and constraints around Ada County and only being able to serve folks in or coming to Ada County. So this is really exciting to see. But I guess those are in anticipation of learning more about who this business is that we're working with. How are we going to be co-locating our sites in Canyon County that we use? How is the name, the images, the colors? I really like that you want to build on that culture, but how can we find that balance of a different identity so there isn't confusion, but also it works well together? So I think those are going to be some of the things that I'm looking for, so that so each program can stand alone, but they're very complementary.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. We've been working closely with ACHD Commuter Ride staff as we develop the scope of this project.
Great.
And we will continue to do that as we move through the selection process. If we are finalizing at least the contract in February, we would be working from February next couple of months with Commuter Ride and VRT to figure out how all of those details. We've proposed to come to the commission, if you would like, to have maybe a deeper conversation on that, or whatever form you would want to have that kind of conversation. We're happy to do.
I think it'd be better once it's more firmed up. I
right.
love that you guys are talking, and I think a lot of the commission generally trusts the team to figure out what's best in this type of instance. So thank you. Other questions? Mr. Daly.
Thank you. What's the anticipation in this new contract in relation to the statistics that show the van pool is going down in terms of ridership?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Daly, so I'm not sure exactly where to take that, other than to say that we would be working with a van pool partner to provide the opportunity for residents in Canyon County to van pool to their employment sites. We would only be on the hook to provide support, federal funding support to that when a van pool is organized. So there's no risk in terms of funding for service that isn't being used, because it's on a reimbursement basis of after the van pool is formed. So yes, there's always the possibility that you wouldn't have as much demand as maybe we're hoping for, but there's no financial risk of funding something that then doesn't materialize, because we are only we're only supporting van pools that are actually formed, not the possibility of forming them.
Madam Chair, I guess my point is for the entire year over year, 24-25, it's gone down 4.4%, but in the last quarter, it's gone down 14.7%. So it's going down, not up in terms of its usage. So how is this contract going to help us address that?
Madam Chair, this contract could help us address that by opening up new markets for the Vanpool services. So what you're citing are Vanpool ridership within the ACHD commuter ride service, and this has been an identified gap in the space of Vanpool in Canyon County, is that we don't have service that's comparable to ACHD commuter ride in Canyon County. So it could help bring more vanpooling to the Treasure Valley by opening up the Canyon County market.
Well, I would add to that, once this region started growing and more of our jobs were beginning to locate in Canyon County, those were jobs that in many cases couldn't be served by ACHD commuter ride because the person taking that job didn't originate in Ada County. And so this, we think, will open up the possibility of us continuing to grow the Vanpool program with the growth of the valley and the growth in jobs that we've seen outside of Ada County.
And anecdotally, we hear a lot about folks wanting to be able to participate in commuter ride, but because, they're not coming through, maybe they're coming from Notice or wherever, or Idaho City, but they need to go to Caldwell. Like, that makes it really tricky because we can't help those folks. So I think there definitely is a need from what we've seen and heard, and the restrictions that we have. So I think we're going to see really good numbers.
Madam Chair, so if this is a one-year contract for increasing, and as you said, it's no local funds are being expended for this. There's no risk in that context, except we're all paying those taxes too. But so is this 1 year so we can again look at it, review it, and say, okay, is this still not a dynamic model that we need to follow?
Madam Chair, and Commissioner Daly, the scope that's out on the street, I think, was for 4 years, a 4-year contract. And we will be reviewing that each year. There are clauses of how we could end the contract. But I think our biggest risk is just in maybe not enough van pools being formed, but if that happens, there's also not a financial risk. So we're just making it possible for us to explore this. And then if people come in, then we would begin to use those federal funds to support that. If they don't, then we're no worse off than we are today.
Just as a follow-up, if it is in that context, for a shorter period might be more useful to.
All of our contracts include a termination clause with cause, and that would be a cause certainly to terminate.
Thank you.
Commissioner Daly, I hear your point. I would push back a little bit. I think, and it's nice knowing that you have that security, Elaine, too, to terminate a contract if you need to. But oftentimes, especially when you're creating a program for the first time, it takes so much work to get out in the communities, for them to trust the reliability of that program. They're like, oh yeah, I remembered, I forgot. And then I got to wait 6 months to try it again. You know what I mean? Like, those things take time. And so I would urge the board not to be, too harsh on that first year, just on numbers alone. It should be a much more, holistic conversation. How did they get out in the community? What types of riders are using it? Which ones are we not getting into, right? So I think that tells us a bigger and better picture about where the need is. Are we actually meeting that need, and how are we planning on, fixing that gap?
I guess this would be a question for ACHD then. How long have you had your program, and how long has it been, in essence, experimental and trying to be dynamic and meet the needs?
Well, like Stephen said, we've had it for 50 years. So a very long time. And I'm sure I have a team member on Zoom, but we've updated the logo and just like the red vans, right? And just all of those things. And it's a super strong and easily identifiable program now with like trusted private partners. And, you know, we have this huge partnership with the Mountain Home Air Force Base. Like these are huge partnerships that don't come online in just a year or two, right? It takes demonstration that, oh, we have, you know, employees or a group of folks that could use this. It takes a lot of time from the entity or VRT to make a connection with that business or that nonprofit entity, right? To say, hey, we'd like to present this thing that we could offer, and then getting that on the calendar and then getting folks to actually do it. So that takes time. That's my point. And we've been able to do a lot of really good things over the 50-year history, but we've seen a huge acceleration in the last, I'm sure someone could correct me, but my sense is it's about like the last 10 years, 10, 15 years.
And I would note, I've, been watching this for over 20 years, and van pools do ebb and flow based on the employer location and housing location. I think another thing that's impacted the van pool program in the last few years has been the move to remote work and trying to adjust to that market. But again, even in the case of ACHD commuter ride, there's no risk to VRT, even frankly, no risk to ACHD that any money is wasted, that the money only gets spent if a van pool is formed. And when that happens, then the money gets reimbursed both federally and locally by the riders to cover the cost.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify that point again. It's been said a few ways, but there is no administrative fixed cost of this up front. The entire reimbursement of this comes upon the turnkey program recovering from the actual services. So if a large agricultural provider in Canyon County wants to facilitate vans for employees from Marsing, they can do that. And the administration of this will all come out of the van reimbursement. So
That is correct.
the only, I think, impact or risk of this is if, there's any reputational risk of van pools generally, but to the extent that we have partners willing to anticipate expanding this, I think it's only probably to the good of our provision of services. So, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think it will be an awesome way to break in the 2 brand new executive board members from Canyon County.
Yes. Other questions for Stephen? Anyone online? Okay, this is an action item, so I do need a motion. Commissioner Rast.
I think it might be appropriate come from Canyon County since I do work there.
10 points, yes.
I do think this is a low risk, but fills the void what we need in Canyon County. So I would actually like to make a motion to approve resolution to BBD 26-012.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Mark. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so because we've had such great dialogue, we're running a little bit behind. So Elaine, do you mind if we defer item D and push that onto the next?
Yeah, so I would suggest that both item D and item F could be deferred till April. Originally, we thought we had to have a policy in place this month so we could implement item D, but we now know that we don't have to implement until April of 27. So if we could go ahead with the legislative discussion, and if there's no other time left, we'll defer the other 2. That would, I think, be a good move.
Elaine, we're not seeing an F on our agenda, but do we need a motion at all to make that deferral? Considering.
I think you can just rule. I can't remember.
All right, okay, cool. We're going to do that. All right, we're going to move on to action item E, legislative update and discussion. Elaine.
All right, and we have a short presentation. We've had this discussion at the executive board. You all got an email a couple of months ago to inform that executive board discussion, and then information in this packet to inform the discussion today. Next slide. So this is an action item. Staff is requesting that the Board of Directors approve this draft legislation to address funding shortfalls and empower the Chief Executive Officer to share draft legislation with legislators and other stakeholders for discussion and consideration. It's important to note that this is not saying, asking any of you to go out and actively support this legislation. What this is designed to do is put words on the table that we can get reactions to, so we can get true understanding of whether or not there's support or opposition, and if there is, what that is, and if there's adjustments that could be made to make this better. The idea is to begin the discussion now, and hopefully by next year have it ripe enough that we can begin more active discussion on it. Next slide. This legislation does not ask the state to provide any dedicated funds for public transportation. It doesn't spend any state funding. It does not allow it. That's a mistake, sorry. It does allow taxing authority under the Regional Transportation Authority Act, like every other political subdivision in the state of Idaho has, to decide when and if the board thinks it's appropriate to run a referendum and ask voters and taxpayers if they're willing to create a dedicated funding source for public transportation. Next slide. Right now, generally half of our funding comes from federal funding and or earned funding, and half the revenue from voluntary contributions. VRT needs more consistent, reliable local funding if we're going to be able to respond to regional growth. We have not been able to grow the system as the region has grown because there is no reliable way for that to happen. Next. So the statement of need here is that we treat regional public transportation authorities the same as other political subdivisions in the state. Of all the political subdivisions, VRT and housing authorities are the only that don't have either fee or levy authority. Housing authorities were designed to be federal pass-throughs, but VRT statute is written that recognizes that we do need local funding to operate, but only authorizes voluntary contributions. Even mosquito abatement districts have levy authority, recreation districts, among others. And so all we'd be asking for is to treat us the same as those. Next. This is a pretty difficult path, to be honest. It only allows the Board of Directors to levy a property tax after that, whatever the amount is approved by 66 2/3 majority of voters within the service boundaries. The money has to be used for public transportation. It has to be based on an adopted public transportation plan. It can only be voted on during an election in November of any year, and the levy may not exceed 1 mil. Next. RPTAs would be subject to all the other limitations that every other taxing district is limited to. 3% maximum yearly budget increase, 90% assessment limit on new construction growth, 8% overall cap on budget growth. And the budget has to be approved by the RPTA Board of Directors after a public hearing, even after that vote. We found two things that were a little different from what we had originally talked about. One is that our RPTA is formed on county boundaries, but the statute as it's currently written allows regions to establish RPTAs that are not strictly aligned with county boundaries. Counties would still collect those taxes, but the district boundaries would be designed and outlined during the vote. And so rather than limit this to only county-wide RPTAs, we elected to leave it as is, that entity could choose which of those two boundary options they wanted to follow before they take the vote. Then the vote would be based on that boundary. So the draft legislation retains both of those options. Next. The other question that arose when we talked to legislative services about this is, what about bonding? So we included what it would take to authorize general obligation bonds, that it would have to be based on the plan, and there would be a limit to the amount of debt service. So the draft legislation is in your packet, the full language on pages 197 through 202. And my request today, again, is just that you approve this draft of legislation so that I'm empowered to begin discussions with both legislators and other potential partners about whether or not this is the right direction for us to proceed in order to pursue a dedicated funding source. Questions?
Thanks, Elaine. Questions? Yes, Jason.
Just one clarification on the regional portion. Can that include multiple counties or is that a sub portion of a county?
Say that again.
For the regional designation, can that include multiple county jurisdictions or?
So in our case, regional became a 2-county region, but with separate votes in each county. And the way the legislation's written today, it would still require that, we believe, because of the taxing assessment mechanism that's in place at the state. So like Ada County and Canyon County, if a region, say, in Idaho Falls, well, Pocatello is probably the primary example in this case. So Bannock County has a regional transit service that is mostly paid for by the taxpayers in Bannock County voluntarily through assessments of the city of Pocatello, but they also have partnerships with seven other counties, and part of their local funding is provided by those 7 other counties. If they were to choose to go forward with an RPTA, they could choose to create RPTAs in each of those counties and then join, like Ada and Canyon County did, into one entity that becomes the regional one. And in that case, each of those could have a separate mill levy, for instance. That's what essentially happens today. The amount of contributions in the outer counties are much less than what's in the central county. Does that make sense? Yeah. Thanks.
Other questions? Comment? Okay.
Online?
All right, this is an action item. So is there a motion?
Madam Chair, before there's a motion, I think I would like to make some comments first. One is, I guess as a former legislator, I'm uncomfortable with having precise language of a legislation. Talking about the concept of funding local jurisdictions is an issue that I think is worthy of discussion at the legislative level. But when we think about it in the context of the reality of this year, a couple of very important things are, one, it's an election year, and 2, this is an increase in potential increase in taxes. It's property tax related. The legislature has given property tax relief to local jurisdictions over the last 3 years and use their figure, 1.4 billion. I just think the discussion is worthy, maybe, but having a specific piece of legislation takes it to another whole step other than just a discussion. This is formalizing a specific proposal as a legislative proposal. I think that's very dangerous for us because, as you know, in the legislative process, sometimes you have years of discussion, but if you have starting the discussion with just a red ears, not even wanting to listen, impact, as opposed to, okay, let's talk about this, let's think about this, there may be a need for it, a local funding issue, because local option sales tax has been discussed. There's all sorts of options that have been discussed at the legislative level for local option taxes, and none of them have passed so far. But I just don't think the timing is right. Now, understanding that, again, as a former legislator, usually proposals don't pass in the first year anyway. So that's a positive for the argument in favor of doing this. But I just don't think the timing's right for us to even go into that forum. But that's my opinion.
Thanks, Commissioner Daley, because I was going to ask you what's the risk of introducing this legislation? So I appreciate you speaking to that element of it. Elaine, do you mind talking a little bit about all the conversations you've been having and how you arrived at this legislation and why this angle?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I'd also like to invite Lance Giles up to the table. He's our government affairs consultant, and he might be able to also inform some of this discussion. So I took this job almost 3 years ago and almost immediately began having informal discussions about a dedicated funding source. Many of you, some of you maybe anyway, remember that 15 years ago, Compass and Valley Regional Transit worked really hard and thank you, Mayor McLean. Sorry that this went long, but we appreciate you. There was a concerted discussion at the legislature about a local option sales tax. At the end of the day, it got to the floor and was voted down based on disagreement over the percentage vote that would be required and whether or not it would be enshrined in the Constitution. There really hasn't been any discussion since then about anything related to public transportation in terms of dedicated funding. So as I approached this, I said, so tell me, where are we 15 years later? And I can tell you that concertedly, I heard that there would never be a local option sales tax for transit. And my response was, well, I'm not asking for one. What I'm asking for is a dedicated funding source. If not that, what? And over the last 2 years, as those discussions have gone on, the property tax emerged as the one that seemed to at least make sense philosophically, if you will. Why are we being treated special as RPTAs versus any other political subdivision? And in those discussions have gotten sort of head nods that maybe this was a direction that made some sense. And so from my perspective, being able to bring specific language is important because then you get more detailed discussion about, okay, if it makes sense, is this it or not? And so that's where we are. And Lance, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Madam Chair.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I found as my experience in government affairs is that legislators, they'll hear a concept, but they oftentimes say, well, I can't really, it's really difficult for me to make a decision until I have some specific language. And I think it's important for us here today is that we're not proposing to introduce anything this session at all. All we're proposing is to say, to meet with key legislators and just say like, hey, here's what we're thinking. What are your thoughts on this? And what we're hoping to do is get some feedback, say, yeah, I think that's a good idea, or no way, or hey, how about a little tweak here and there, those kinds of things. But I find it a lot easier to start with a conversation to say, here's what we're thinking, rather than just, how do we get reliable funding, dedicated funding, then you get into this conversation of all these different deals. Elaine and other policy folks have thought about this, and this is and you have as well, as far as just kind of saying, let's have something to give them a takeaway to say, here's our thoughts, but what are yours? And so I just find it always a lot more helpful for legislators if you have something to give them rather than just, what do you think? So that's the rationale, is that if we have a little takeaway, we can get some thoughts, but we are not trying to move any legislation this session. We're just trying to get some feedback to see what the appetite is. Obviously, I can guess where I think a lot of legislators are at, and but again, you just don't really know until you have something to give them to get the conversation going. So that's the rationale by having a draft, not an RS or anything on that level.
Thanks, Lance. Commissioner?
Madam Chair, actually, I'm just the Chief Operating Officer.
I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine.
The commissioner hasn't been here, so I don't know his face.
I work directly with all three commissioners, so I'm pretty in tune with that. And so I do have to say the three commissioners in Canyon County do align with Commissioner Daly in Ada County. They do feel like the legislation, especially pointed draft, is a little early without the conversations, and they wouldn't feel comfortable with it at this point. They would like to have those conversations with their local legislators.
But wouldn't it be harder to have that conversation just based off of me not knowing again who Commissioner Rast is? I think there's a piece, I like to assume everyone has positive intent and understands VRT and understands the issue that it's been faced with, not of its own making, for years. And so I appreciate and support that folks want to have those conversations with their legislators, but it's really hard for them to speak from a place of knowledge if they don't have something to start with, or if they're not even present.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that is correct. They're just more concerned about the property tax, because this is a property tax being imposed onto the constituent. And we're already paying a lot of taxes. There's a lot of things coming up with the state side of limiting property taxes and whatnot. They're just concerned. If we add another levy or another tax rate out there, how much will it be and what is all included in that? So it's really the unknown at this point.
Okay.
So just to be clear, the legislation wouldn't impose a tax. The legislation would only give this board the authority to consider asking for one.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I don't have a whole lot to contribute to this perhaps, but my experience in Star in the last 2.5 years trying to get a new fire station, city built a new fire station, our fire district can't get it staffed because people are so against additional property taxes. When you look at what I would consider an essential service being emergency services like fire response and, health related versus a ride somewhere, I put those two things in, and I think my constituents do also put those two things in very different categories. Speaker of the House lives down the street from me. He will not entertain, even with me, a conversation about property taxes, hardly for even those type of services. We're in an environment right now that I think is so anti-property tax that coming at it with a specific proposal for how to fund it might be problematic. So I do think it's a good idea to go with an idea in mind for that discussion, but maybe one that's less specific and that meets the goals I've heard you talk about today, which is let's just have a conversation and talk about possibilities.
Madam Chair, how
Yes,
would it work if
Commissioner.
we approve this for a discussion piece of legislation to be shared with legislators to get their opinion? I mean, that's basically what they're asking. They're not asking, but where it says that we're approving this draft legislation, that might be the issue. So we could approve it so far as a talking point to start discussions right on property taxes, but they're still hitting that 66 2/3 mark. So chances of something like that selling today are pretty slim, but I think it does open the opportunity for Lane to at least start having some discussions and see where people are at with it. That would be my suggestion.
Yep. Yep, Jason, real quick.
Could you maybe help me understand the scale of what we're talking? I'm seeing a 0.1% of 1 mil proposal. I think if I do the math right, that's several times the current operating costs the VRT runs on. But is there a figure of what that would generate for scale?
Sure. In fact, there is. Right now, if we were to set a tax that would fund our current services, which I think we've made pretty clear we don't feel are robust enough for a growing region, it would be at 0.00001, so 10% of a mil. If you look at our Valley Connect 3.0 plan, as we're beginning to propose it, the mill rate would be closer to 0.00003 or 3% of 1 mil. At that, we would be close to being able to fund the amount of revenue service that our peer cities that have much more ridership than us, for instance, do. So still pretty low.
Going back to Mayor Steer's point, more of a bit being about a discussion. Is there someone that does anyone want to vote on that being like the motion? Is that the right step, Mayor Steer?
If that's acceptable, I mean, we're not being.
Do you want to turn on your mic? Right.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair.
Right.
Well, I guess if we could just, we have a lobbyist. He could have a discussion without a piece of legislation. He could even say, he could pick up something from the past and say, this is what's been proposed in the past, or pick up something from another state and say, this is ideas from another state. He wouldn't have to have a piece of a document certified by us that this is our idea of where we want to go. I guess it's similar to what we talked about in Compass last fall in November about having a vote on a train as our preferred alternative. That now is our preferred alternative. And last year we were just talking about it. Now it's our preferred alternative. And if we're going someplace in mass transit in the Valley, that's our preferred alternative because we voted on it that way.
Commissioner Daly, what I'm hearing is this is not a preferred alternative. This is not a preferred, this is just a starting point, because what I'm gathering from Elaine and all the conversations that I've even been a part of with legislators is they don't understand how transit is funded. We are the last state in the country that does not have state dedicated funds for transit. So they are relying on us to produce something. It doesn't have to be the thing. And that's what Elaine and Lance are saying. This is not the same as the Compass vote, Commissioner Daly, because this is very much just a starting point. And to your point, it could be one of several pieces that that Lance, with his professional opinion, could determine this is something I should share with this person, because I think that they might actually they would be actually, consider enough to understand and give us good feedback versus maybe a different piece to a different legislator. Am I understanding that correct, Lance? Like you would use your professional opinion to weigh when to bring this in and when not to, because it's just a piece of a bigger puzzle.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
So that's my point.
Okay.
If you're a lobbyist coming to a legislator saying, we think public transportation in Idaho needs a source of funding, and they say, okay, give me an idea. Okay, here's my idea. That's a proposal presented to them. That is my point. Instead of saying, here are a variety of proposals. Here's what Utah did. Here's what Oregon did. Here's what Alabama did, or New York or something. That's totally different than what we're talking about. This we're voting on is having this, in my opinion, it's the same. This is our preferred alternative for mass transit funding in the state of Idaho. That's my problem. That is my problem.
So if I could, I can understand why you would say that, but for me, having the ability to share actual language about how you might do this is not a preferred alternative, but an alternative. Because what I've heard in my 3 years of talking to legislators about this is, well, how would you do it? Well, here's one way to do it. We're not proposing this to introduce it this year. We're proposing to have you look at it and tell us, is this the way you do it? If it isn't, what is the way you do it? What are the other things that we could do instead? And without having that specific language to have that discussion, it becomes just this sort of circular thing. Well, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. We could think about it. And if we're going to get anywhere with this, I'd like to be able to do more than just say we're going to think about it, but actually get down to, well, how would we do it? And so this gives us a starting point for the how. Does that make sense?
It makes sense in one sense, but the other sense is, the legislative process is this: you have an idea, whether it's a citizen coming to a legislator or it's a legislator have an idea. I think we should have funding for mass transit in the state of Idaho. So the next step is you go to LSO, they write up something based on what your ideas are. This is what we think is a good idea, because it could be any number of things. And then they write a proposal. And then it becomes an RS, it goes to the committee, then it comes to, that's what this is. It's gone to LSO. A discussion's been held about this is our idea of what we want, and this is the proposal. Again, that is my issue. We have a very specific proposal that we've come up with as an idea. I don't like that.
So as an example, if I could, last year, a member of the legislature introduced a local option taxing proposal. It was much like, frankly, this is. It was her idea, wasn't vetted by anyone else. And then she ran it as an RS, and she did that to engender conversation around that proposal and whether it was the right one and whether the things in it were the right things or not. We wouldn't even go that far. We're not proposing for anyone to make it an RS. We're just saying, here's a proposal. Let's have some conversation. So it's designed to do pretty much the same thing that was, but not going nearly as far.
Madam Chair, I think we're ready for a vote.
I think we are too. Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, Mayor Steer.
may I suggest a motion?
Yes, sir.
That would be to empower our Chief Executive Officer to address our funding challenges and to share a concept for legislation with legislators and others for discussion and consideration. Does that make sense?
Concept.
Could label it that.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation about, without belaboring it, but I do want to highlight a different piece to this conversation that I don't think we have talked about. I mean, I don't represent a municipality or a land use partner, but all of y'all have been saddled with paying for Valley Regional Transit and paying for this service, right? I hear all the time about how this is a huge load on your budgets. There's groups of you that aren't funding VRT for one of those many reasons. And again, I think Elaine has worked really hard to talk to folks about what is at stake, why we need something. And I think, folks oftentimes are like, yeah, that's great. But unless we have concepts of an idea or an idea, we just kind of spin in circles. And I think in order for us to see, I think it behooves our municipal partners in particular to get forward, move some of these ideas forward, because the burden is so high on you guys. And for you to be able to have more diversified funding, we need to be able to move along. And can be a really long process, as you know, Commissioner Daly, right? This takes years. And so I think this sets us up, even with probably what could be considered as the chaotic energy that's probably going to anticipate next week. Maybe next year, right, we have a different pathway based off of the feedback we receive from the conversations. I think that sets us up, right, with some better timelines, and there's never a right time. So I think that's what I'll just share. Anything else before we take a vote?
Madam Chair, I'll just, if somebody else wanted to talk, I'll.
No, that's.
We're not enemies. We're discussing an issue that we have difference of opinion on, and that's our system of government. So I don't want anybody to feel like what's going to come out of this is creating enemies of each other. No matter what happens, we're going to move forward in trying to help the system we have. So I just want to say that that dialogue is what's critically important for our system of government to function properly, and that's what we've had. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Daly. All right, so I think this will be not unanimous. So I'm wondering if we can, do we want to do a voice vote or do we voice vote? Great. So folks online, make sure you're participating as well as folks in the room. So, all right. Mayor Steer made the motion. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carry. Oh,
Abstain.
Okay. Well, with that, motion carries. Thanks, Lance, for being here. Thank you, Commissioner Daly.
Can we have a recorded vote of the people present?
Would you like a recorded vote?
Yes, please.
Madam Chair.
I can't tell who that is. Who is that?
It's me. It's Jordan. My laptop died.
Hi.
My laptop died while the motion was made. Can you repeat the motion for me?
Okay, so the motion was
before we do a voice vote.
Oh, it was to approve a draft concept of legislation to address the funding challenges. That's essentially what it was. Correct, Mayor Steer?
Yeah, it was to allow our chief executive officer to address our funding challenges and empower the chief executive officer to share a concept for legislation with legislators and others for discussion and consideration. Kind of thereabouts, real close. And I know it's going to be a tough sell. If you can get this through, then I will bow to you, because I really don't see that we're going to get there, but it certainly opens up the conversation. And the main thing is we're not doing anything that makes anybody do anything. We're asking a question, and that's the reason that I think this is viable. So,
Commissioner Daly, you wanted a
just record. See. Does that work?
You need to turn your mic, Elaine. Turn on your mic. There you go.
So I'm proposing that instead of doing the whole roll call, because I'm not sure who's left and who's not, that we just ask for the nays to identify themselves. And if it's clear that it's less than more than a majority, then we'll do a roll call. Does that make sense?
Madam Chair, I'd like to know who is present actually and have a recorded vote actually. I'd like to have a recorded vote of everybody present so we know who was present and voting.
Well, then let's start with online.
Okay.
Do you want me to do it, or do you want to do it, Elaine, or Paula?
You mind?
I can do it.
Oh,
you got. Oh. Okay.
Okay. Paula has the list, so she'll do it.
All right. So just as a recap, folks online, is it recording your vote?
And I'm going to just go right down the line. Tom Daly.
No.
Joe Steer. Zach Pipemeyer.
Yes.
Helen Russell. Helen, are you still with us?
Helen Russell.
Mike Dittenberg. John Evans. Kevin Nielsen,
Yes.
Mark Stewart,
Yes.
Alexis Pickering,
Yes.
David Teedy,
Yes.
Jeff Flynn,
Is there any more?
Jordan Morales,
Yes.
Lance McGinnis Brown,
Yes.
Bree Brush,
Yes.
Mark Wasdall, David Porterfield, Nicole Bear Spencer, Greg Rast,
No.
and Jason Brinkman.
Abstain.
That concludes it.
Ms. Paula, Commissioner Daly,
That's fine.
is that fine? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, well, with that, can we skip the information items, Elaine?
Yes,
Okay,
as always, if there's a question about procurements, ask us and we'll defer those other two items to April.
and we do not have an executive session. And with that, okay, before we break, Kevin, thank you. Thank you for being here. It is a sight to see Star represented. Thank you so much for making the time and the effort, bringing your expertise. And thank you to Mayor Evans for such
Yes.
wonderful service. And we already miss you. So thank you.
You'll get over it.
Maybe, we'll see. But with that, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.